When it comes to developing awareness, I think one of the things to do is remember we have sight, we have smell, we have hearing, we have touch, we have taste. And we often tend to have a habit of maybe looking at but not listening, or eating but not smelling or tasting. So I think because those five senses are really what connects us to the environment, both internally and externally, simple practices is, if I'm looking at my iPhone, whether that's a waste of time or not, can I also pay attention to what I feel around myself, what I hear around myself, what I smell in the room, etc.? Because what you do is you expand the field of awareness, and then through spiritual practices, those grow into the voyances such as clairvoyance, seeing through, clairaudience, hearing beyond the physical realm of hearing in the five senses. And then those things grow into, as you know from shamanic training, an innate ability to have second attention, where you're actually aware in the background, even though you might be very focused on doing a math equation or whatever. There's always room for, I call it, keeping the mailbox open. In the middle of doing something where you're very focused, your awareness is drawn, and sure enough, a kid's about to walk out in the street in front of a car, and you run and grab the kid. But if you didn't have the mailbox open, the kid might have been dead. So simply put, I'm saying pay attention to the available sources of information gathering and see if you can just direct your awareness to them. And a good exercise that I actually learned a long, long time ago from Dr. Oliver, which I've tested 1,000 times, and it always blows my mind. And that is, if you're just walking, like walking through the forest or walking anywhere in a meditative state, which we classically use slow walking, Dr. Oliver says, pay attention to what you're hearing through your right ear for a minute, then switch to what you're hearing through your left ear. And after 2 or 3 times, it balances the brain hemispheres. And interestingly, you can just do that sitting in your chair, and you will actually begin to feel the body and the mind becoming more integrated. So there's a very simple practice. Just listen through your right ear for a minute, switch to your left ear, put your focus on that. Do that 3-4 times, and pay attention to what happens inside of you, and you become more aware. And I think those are simple practices.
I think that's beautiful. I think with awareness, it's important to remember that our awareness or our attention is our greatest asset.
Yes.
That social media and many others are fighting and paying lots of money to get our awareness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Our clicks 1 second longer on an ad or a reel is worth millions and millions of dollars. And so we have to recognize that our awareness is our greatest asset, and we must protect it and be very aware of what we're putting our focus on. I think we have to understand that just like the social media companies have algorithms to point back to us what we're focusing on and feeding us back more and more of what our interests are, is that if you take that up to a meta principle, that the universe itself has an algorithm of reporting back to you your own biases and your own interests and presenting more and more of what you're focusing on.
It has no choice because we are the universe.
Well, there you go. So, the point is I think we have to really recognize that our greatest tool, our greatest asset is awareness and presence. I'll give you a simple example. My kids would care less right now if I was in here making a good investment. All they want me to do is go out there and spend time with them and, play with a toy, right? It's like to them, my presence with them is worth more than gold, right? And so, I think that's the core out of it. But we have to recognize that we have to be like that child to ourselves and realize that our own awareness and our own presence is very valuable, and be very careful on what you focus on and what you actually pay attention to and who you give your presence to.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to focus, what you've listed as focus ability, one, I think it depends on awareness, but you can, for example, see if you're trying to write an email to somebody, say about work or something important, how many times did you get distracted by your phone or text messages coming in or smells or sounds that actually are inconsequential to what you're trying to do? And you can realize that you have this habitual tendency to be easily distracted. And so what you're getting is a measure of your capacity for concentration. And that is ultimately why meditation is so important, because meditation really, most people are very confused. They think it's trying to stop their mind, but it's actually going behind the mind, as you know, and simply witnessing and observing the phenomena arising, like watching waves on the ocean. But the thing that's important that I'm trying to drive at here is that when we go into a state of meditation and we detach ourselves from sensory inputs and mental inputs and emotional inputs just to simply witness, we're actually creating space, which is what open focus is. We're creating space in our mind so that we actually have a container, and inside of that container, with the ability to breathe, for spirit to flow, we, through that process, develop a level of discernment on what is or is not worth being distracted by. And I think that's the beauty of it, is that awareness, focus, ability, concentration, and meditation are all like cardinal points on a compass. They all influence each other, and any one of them can be used to enhance the other, which I think is quite a beautiful little reality.
Yeah, I think it's true. And I think you're hitting on a really important point, is that the death of all of those is distraction.
Yep.
You know, I think what people don't realize is that flow science shows that it takes like a good 30 minutes or so, I believe, to drop into like an immersed state. You know, when we first started this conversation, I mean, we probably drop in pretty quickly because we're buddies, but you know, sometimes like you know, you're working out the kinks at the beginning, and all of a sudden it takes a little bit of time when you're really in the flow. What people don't realize is that you cultivate all of that energy to get into this flow state, this state when you're writing something, and all of a sudden you hit this peak where your memory goes up, your creativity goes up, even your immune system ramps up when you're in those moments. Your ability to recall information, connect dots, all of these different things. Even your physiological performance is going up in these flow states. That it takes a while to cultivate that, but then what happens is a 1 second distraction can knock you out. Like, for example, if I'm in the middle of writing and I'm like in this deep flow and I have my phone on and someone sends me a text message, if I go and tend to that phone and look at the phone and read that text message and I think to myself, it's only going to take me 10 seconds to write this text message back, that's really the wrong question. The question I have to ask myself is, how long is it going to take me to drop back into the flow?
Yeah.
Once I go tend to that distraction. And
Yes.
I think what happens is that we're having these distractions. We're not cultivating these environments where we can actually work smarter, not harder or longer. That if we want to sit down and write something, it makes sense to carve out a 1 hour of your day when you're completely siloed, phones are off, you create the right environment, you do your heart breathing, you do your various things, and then bang it out. Because if not, you might be there for 4-6 hours dealing with distractions and getting the same amount of work done.
Yeah, and it brings me to wanting to share too, like when I was a paratrooper and we'd have to go to the shooting range quite a bit. And it's a competition anytime you go to the shooting range. You're not just competing with yourself, but you're competing with not only everybody in your platoon, but all the other platoons and companies. They want good shots in the military. But, you know, when I used to be on these courses with pop-up targets all the way to 400 meters, and oftentimes you only have 1 to 4 seconds, depending on how the computer regulates the targets. But you really have to knock everything else out. You can't pay attention to the shooters on either side. It's kind of like when you're bowling. If you get distracted by the guy in the lane beside you, you're not going to bowl very well. So you got to really learn to just focus. And then other things, you know, Zen is a well-known path to self-mastery and spiritual mastery. But Zen archery, you really have to focus with a bow and arrow. Juggling takes a tremendous amount of focus. If you get distracted, you drop the ball, even if you're just doing 2 balls. And I know from the gym, anytime you're doing things that are challenging your balance, like kneeling on a Swiss ball or trying to do curl to press on one leg, you have to really bring your awareness and your focus right into your body or you'll fall over. So I think there's little things that we can do to enhance meditation, concentration, awareness, and focusability. So what I'm pointing out is when you go to the gym, if you use the right exercises, you're getting there. If you want to practice, try archery. Try, going to a shooting range and shooting at some targets, which is really fun and a great skill to have. There's all these little things that we can do that are fun that often aren't that expensive. Like anybody can try kneeling and balancing on a Swiss ball. And there's a ton of stuff you can do on a Swiss ball that will enhance all of these qualities because otherwise the ball lets you fall off and you get your report card.